নন্দ যশোদা জয় জয় গোপগণ, শ্রীদামাদি জয় জয় ধেনু বৎসগণ। জয় বৃষভানু জয় কীর্তিদা সুন্দরী, জয় জয় পূর্ণমাসী আভিরা নাগরী। জয় জয় গোপীশ্বর বৃন্দাবন মান, জয় জয় কৃষ্ণ সখা বটু দ্বিজরা। জয় রাম ঘাট জয় রোহিণী নন্দন, জয় জয় বৃন্দাবন বাসী যত জন। জয় দ্বিজ পত্নী জয় কন্যাগণ, ভক্তিতে যাহারা পাইল গোবিন্দ চরণ। জয় দ্বিজ পত্নী জয় নাগ কন্যাগণ, ভক্তিতে যাহারা পাইল গোবিন্দ চরণ। শ্রীরাস মণ্ডল জয় জয় রাধা শ্যাম, জয় জয় রাসলীলা সর্বমনোরম। শ্রীরাস মণ্ডল জয় জয় রাধা শ্যাম, জয় জয় রাসলীলা সর্বমনোরম। জয় জয় জলরস সর্বরস সার, পরকীয়া ভাবে যাহা ব্রজেতে প্রচার। জয় জয় জলরস সর্বরস সার, পরকীয়া ভাবে যাহা ব্রজেতে প্রচার। শ্রীজান্নবা পাদ পদ্ম করিয়া স্মরণ, দীন কৃষ্ণ দাস কহে নাম সংকীর্তন। শ্রীজান্নবা পাদ পদ্ম করিয়া স্মরণ, দীন কৃষ্ণ দাসে কহে নাম সংকীর্তন। শ্রীজান্নবা পাদ পদ্ম করিয়া স্মরণ, দীন কৃষ্ণ দাসে কহে নাম সংকীর্তন। হরে কৃষ্ণ 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 হরে হরে, হরে রাম 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 হরে হরে। হরে কৃষ্ণ 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 হরে হরে, হরে রাম 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 হরে হরে। হরে কৃষ্ণ 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 হরে হরে, হরে রাম 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 হরে হরে। Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. So today we are very fortunate to have association of His Grace Yadubara Prabhuji. So I will just give a brief introduction about Prabhuji. Prabhuji is popularly known as the photographer of Srila Prabhupada. So Prabhu met Srila Prabhupada in December 1970 in Surat, India, and he was doing his master's degree in photography on the subject of origins of Krishna consciousness in India. At that time, Prabhuji was having several cameras, and Pretty soon, His Divine Grace allowed him to accompany the traveling party for 2 months. So Prabhuji was staying in India after that for 2.5 years, taking initiation in Kolkata in 1971. And the first documentary film about ISKCON called Hare Krishna People, that was made by Prabhuji. And then Srila Prabhupada liked the idea, and he funded the project from BBT. The film was produced in 1974, and Prabhupada asked Yadubara Prabhu to produce more films and make them the most popular films. Over the years, Prabhu and his good wife Vishakha Mataji produced 4 films that Prabhupada saw personally, and 4 more films after his departure. One of which is very famous, you would have seen, Your Ever Well Wisher. And in 1976, Yadubara Prabhu and Vishakha Mataji, they were with Srila Prabhupada in Washington, D.C. And there Prabhupada asked them to photograph this Capitol building in US. And by seeing that photographs, Prabhupada got the idea to have the Chaitanya Chandrodaya temple built in the same pattern. And recently we were very fortunate to get the opportunity to see this movie Hare Krishna, the mantra, the mantra. So that was also directed by Prabhuji only. So we are very fortunate to have Prabhu's association, and we welcome him by loudly chanting one time Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Thank you very much, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
First, I'd like to offer my deep sympathies and condolences to the disciples of His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami, his followers also, and really everyone who knew him, including myself. It's as we know, it's hard for us all to believe that we will not see Maharaj again physically here, but we know that he is in a very wonderful place in spiritual world. So let me just, since I just mentioned Maharaj, let me just speak a little bit about him before we start my presentation. I first came in contact with Maharaj during Prabhupada's departure time. It was 1977 in Vrindavan. And I remember that Maharaj, he didn't have a watch, and he was helping, he was serving Prabhupada. If you're a servant of Prabhupada, you really need to know what time it is, because Prabhupada was very punctual about everything. So I forget if I offered my Seiko watch to Maharaj, and he very happily accepted. And he never forgot that. Many times when I'd see him, he mentioned that watch. That he was so thrilled to receive that, very simple watch from me. And Maharaj always supported our film projects. He donated some Lakshmi, a good amount of Lakshmi for the Hare Krishna movie. And also he sat in Mayapur a couple of years ago and watched the Bengali version, although he'd seen the film before. He watched the premiere of the Bengali edition in Mayapur. And Jayapataka Swami was also there, and His Holiness Ratna Swami. So that was a wonderful, wonderful event. He really appreciated the translation and the narration in Bengali. I was also working with Maharaj on the Abhay Charan series. I directed 4 of those films. He was directing the London episode when I came on, and he was very generously gave me that opportunity to direct. I was on camera the first few days, but then he just handed over direction to me, which was very generous of him. It was his series, really. And many times when I would arrive in Mayapur, Maharaj we'd see each other at Mangal Arati, because people would, devotees would arrive, and then we'd all get settled and then go to the Mangal Arati and morning program. So invariably when I would arrive, Maharaj would leave, when he would see me in Mangal Arati, he would leave his spot, usually in the front, and just come back and give me a big hug. So he was very, very affectionate and very, very warm. So those are a few of my remembrances. Wonderful devotee. So I'm going to share the screen here. Hold on just a moment. So what I'd like to do is speak about my coming to Krishna consciousness. You can see that? You can see the slide, Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhuji, it's visible.
I mean, usually don't like to talk about myself, but I know best. We all know our journey best. And really coming to Krishna consciousness means that Krishna is bringing us to Guru. It's a very intimate time with Krishna. Is leading us to Krishna consciousness and the shelter of Guru. So I was a photographer working for one magazine called Asia Magazine. The editor of Asia Magazine was an Indian man, and he was in New York City. He saw the devotees on the streets chanting. So he was very intrigued, and he called me up. I had put my photographs in an agency in New York. He saw them, somehow or other, he saw them out of hundreds of agencies in New York. He found my pictures and he liked them, so he called me up and he's asked to do a photo essay and an article on the movement. So I met the president of New York Temple. He took me immediately to the temple. He liked the idea. I met him in the Harinam party. And this is the first arti that I'd ever been to. And Lord Jagannath, Subhadra, and Baladev, of course, are there. Little Radha Krishna deities. But I was really focused on Lord Jagannath. And I had this experience that I'll never forget throughout my years in Krishna consciousness. I wasn't looking for religion, but coming in front of the Lord during this arti ceremony, I had the realization that this was my eternal occupation, to worship the Lord. And that just, I don't know where that came from. It was a very strong realization. And we can all of us remember, very strong feelings of connection to Krishna and his devotees. And those are very treasured moments. We should meditate on those and treasure those particular times. So I did the article, and then I went back to school. I was living with my girlfriend. Her name was Jean. She later became Vishaka Devi. So we were both in photography school together. And my idea was I had to do a master's thesis, so let me go to India and meet Prabhupada. I was very intrigued by the devotees, that first visit to the New York Temple. And actually, Vishaka had a very different impression. She was not so happy. I mean, she was not so enlivened by the experience. In fact, she was brought up an atheist. So anyway, in December 1970, I met devotees in Surat. And this is the time of Prabhupada's World Sankirtan party. Prabhupada called in August, he called many of his disciples to go to India to meet him. It was the first big party that returned to India. And it was a huge, huge success. You can imagine the Indians who had been suppressed by the British rule, by the Muslim rule, seeing Western Vaishnavas adopting their own culture. It was an incredible, joyous event wherever the devotees went. This was in Mumbai. So anyway, I met Prabhupada in Surat. Actually, this is another wonderful picture. By the way, these still pictures, many of them are taken from individual movie frames from the films. So we have, you know, of course, thousands, 24 frames a second in a movie. So actually there's many, many still pictures that we can mine from these films. This is one of my favorites, showing the Harinam party in Mumbai. And we have here illustrated the prediction of Bhaktivinoda Thakur that people of different races and nationalities would come together under the banner of Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement. There's Tamal Krishna Goswami on the left, Dinanath Prabhu in the center, Bhanu Swami there. So, at this particular event, Prabhupada was on stage, and when the kirtan was going on, he jumped off the stage and danced with the devotees. So Prabhupada's Harinam party went all over India. They started in August. I met Prabhupada in Surat in December, but for those August, September, October, November, 3 or 4 months, they were traveling all over India. Wherever they would go, they would, by train, they would jump off wherever the train stopped, and they would have Harinam. So in this way, the whole of India very quickly knew about the presence of the devotees. This was Mathura Junction they stopped at. Unfortunately, at this particular time they stopped, they didn't get off. But we did return to Vrindavan with Prabhupada later. This is Jamuna Devi in ecstasy, being in the Dham. And then here's Surat. The reception in Surat was incredible. I'm sure you've all seen the Hare Krishna movie, and Surat's featured in that movie, the arrival of devotees. And when I met Prabhupada, this is what I looked like. I like to say a crow amongst swans. So I was taking black and white pictures. This is another picture from the films taken at that time. Durlab Prabhu had a very small little Super 8 camera, movie camera. So we're very grateful for him to take the films. When I arrived, I showed Prabhupada that article that was published in the magazine. And I asked him if I could stay to take pictures and travel with the party. And he said something quite surprising. He said, "Are you going to become a devotee?" And I couldn't imagine shaving my head and wearing robes, so I said, "I don't think so, Prabhupada." So Prabhupada said something very startling also. Again, he said, "Then you cannot stay." So here I was 10,000 miles away, and I cannot stay. Anyway, I spent the night. They very kindly, devotees very kindly gave me a place to stay, sleep. And the next morning I got up and nobody said anything, and Prabhupada didn't say anything, and I stayed for 2 months. Sometimes Prabhupada would give instructions for the short term and sometimes for the long term. In this case, it was long term. And I took this to mean that, we have to become devotees. We have to become pure to stay in the association of devotees. Physically, we can be present, but we can't really take advantage unless of that association, unless we become ourselves devotees. So Prabhupada saw that little spark of interest in my heart and very kindly allowed me to stay. This was the second night I was there. The whole street was blocked off. Huge, huge program. Well, Prabhupada, there was a kirtan at the beginning, and then Prabhupada spoke. And then he asked his disciples to speak also. He'd often do that. Prabhupada was speaking, and he'd ask others to speak. So after a few disciples spoke, he turned to me and asked me to speak. That was another startling thing that happened with Prabhupada. Prabhupada would do things that you'd never expect. Anyway, this was one of them. So I spoke a little about my appreciation for the reception that the people of Surat gave the devotees, because it was truly, truly exceptional. Actually, the one, I think it was the mayor in Surat, said even if Indira Gandhi came, the prime minister, she would not have received the welcome that Srila Prabhupada got. These are some of the black and white pictures I took. The routes for the Harinam party, they go out every day in Surat in the morning. And the route would be published in the newspaper, different parts of the city they would cover. So in that particular place, wherever they went, that part of the city would be decorated. And you can see the turnout, just a wonderful, wonderful reception. People were thrilled to see the Western sadhus. This is Bhanu Swami getting tilak. We couldn't move more than a few yards until people came out and gave us garlands and drinks. And they do arti to the Harinam party. This is Malati Devi getting garlands. Some more still pictures from the films. This is Malati Devi. Prabhupada would take his morning walk near the river in Surat. I went back to this particular park. This was parked by the river. And the whole thing is built up. The park is still there, but on both sides of the river, there's huge buildings. It's become a very big city. And devotees would always engage the people of Surat in Harinam. This is Durlabh Prabhu, who was the camera person. He took the movies. He's leading the Boy Scouts in Harinam. You can see there's the movie camera on his arm. This was an engagement in a very small village outside of Surat. Prabhupada would go to at least 3, sometimes 4, and even 5 engagements per day. In this particular engagement, I was completely amazed by Prabhupada's gestures during this particular lecture. And the people were very simple. You can see the simple villagers in the back. But he was so animated. This is Nanda Kumar Prabhu, his servant, playing the mridanga. And after the engagement, Prabhupada took bath and said Gayatri. So Prabhupada was tireless in these engagements. We were very tired, but he was tireless. This is Devananda Prabhu in the lower part of the picture, Prabhupada's servant for some time, some months. And Kaushalya Devi in the back. Prabhupada would often ask her to sing, and also Yamuna Devi lead the kirtans. This is kirtan and Mangalarti in Prabhupada's room. There's only one picture of this, but it was so intense. I've never been to a more intense Mangalarti than the ones in Prabhupada's room. very small room, and it was packed. Yamuna Devi is there, Hansaduta Prabhu on the Mridanga. So Mr. Jariwala was our host. I believe he was a banker. He had a 3-story house, and all the devotees were staying there, about 25 devotees, plus Prabhupada, plus myself. And we were all, I was probably one of the oldest, if not the oldest person in the house, as far as the visitors, all the young devotees. And I was age 27. So you can imagine this first time in India, very young, and there was problems, there was sickness, and there was relationship problems, and so on. Mr. Jariwala was so tolerant and kind. He's there. He's not the person paying pranams to Prabhupada, just next to him on the right with the Nehru hat on. So anyway, we were leaving his house, saying goodbye, and he begged forgiveness to all the devotees for his offenses. And we didn't, we committed the offenses. He was so tolerant and wonderful, wonderful host. After he begged our forgiveness, he started crying. And Prabhupada looked at us, he said, this is a Vaishnava. Prabhupada had such a regal look to him. So the next place was Allahabad. Actually, we went to Bombay first, back to Bombay, and then to Allahabad. And Prabhupada, this time, he didn't go out on Harinam and Surat, but he came out every day in Allahabad. And Prabhupada asked us to do 3 things in Allahabad. And that was deity worship, because very few places had deity worship in those days. I'm sure a lot more do now because of Prabhupada's influence. He also asked us to distribute profuse prasadam, which was really hard because all we had was a wood fire, and we'd have to go out and collect wood every day. And very, very, one of the hardest engagements was cooking. And then also Harinam every day in the morning, early morning. So there are many wonderful personalities here on the left, on the whatever that's called, that drum is Madhavisa Prabhu. Prabhupada said he was the king of Kirtan. And then Tamal Krishna Goswami next to him, and back of him is Madhuri Devi, his wife at that time. And Aravinda Prabhu next to him. The very tall person in the back is Rivati Nandan Prabhu, and he was the head cook. And he told us it was the most difficult engagement he's ever had. And then next to Prabhupada, on Prabhupada's right, in the turban is the Chitananda, the Swami at the time, and then Giriraj with the blanket, and Hansaduta Prabhu, Yamuna Devi, and then Hansaduta Prabhu. This particular gentleman would deliberately travel around India trying to meet Prabhupada. Whenever he would see Prabhupada, he would start jumping up in the air and dancing. Prabhupada really liked him a lot. On the left, you can see a little Saraswati looking at this man. She's on her father's, Shamsundar Prabhu's, shoulders. And Saraswati was a big hit in India. This little girl, I think she was 3 years old maybe, in a little sari and dancing on stage and her arms raised in the air. She would come up to people and she would say, she'd pull on their dhoti or sari, and they'd look down, she would say, guess what? And the person would say, what? And she would say, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and you should surrender to him. And then she'd run away. Prabhupada appreciated her preaching very much. He said she was a great preacher because she would tell people what she knew about Krishna. So Prabhupada very kindly stayed with us in Allahabad. He could have stayed at the Gaudiya Math. He was very familiar with that Gaudiya Math. He donated his time and Lakshmi to that Math. And I believe he was initiated in the Gaudiya Math. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. He could have stayed in a hotel in Allahabad, but he chose to stay with us in a tent. It was very, very cold. And there was no heat. This picture is also there. Actually, this is part of a little film clip. This is one of my favorite pictures of Prabhupada. He looks like the general of Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan army leading the forces in battle. And actually, we are all in rickshaws going to visit the Gaudiya Math. Sri Rupa Gaudiya Math. So again, Prabhupada lived as a householder with his pharmaceutical business in Allahabad for quite some years. These are the deities and the monk. Yamuna Devi again. And the next stop was Benares. And there was a celebration, I believe it was the appearance day of Lord Chaitanya. And Prabhupada was given great honor, given place of honor. He was drawn in the parade through the city in a chariot drawn by white horses. Here's another chariot with the devotees on, some little children acting as Radha Krishna. Charu Swami is on the lower left, Hansavita Prabhu with the yellow hat. Dinanath just above Jayapataka Swami. Dinanath Prabhu was a very great kirtan leader. He would lead many, many kirtans. And he still does. I believe he's in Vrindavan now. If you get a chance, please attend his kirtan. This is the Murti of Lord Chaitanya. Excuse me. This is a shirt that was made by, I call it a shirt because it has a Western collar, made by Mataji in San Francisco. And she was thinking what kind of collar to make, because it's certainly not a traditional Indian kurta. So she was thinking, well, Prabhupada's a cowboy. I'll just make him a Western style shirt. So Prabhupada wore this. He just appreciated the devotion of the Mataji. Here's a close-up. Prabhupada's dark brown eyes were very deep. So this is the large Pandal program in Mumbai. During this time, the Traveling Sankirtan Party, Prabhupada held many big Pandal programs in the major cities. Chennai, Calcutta, Delhi, and Mumbai were the main ones. Madras also. And this is the place where Prabhupada called one Westerner out in the very back of the crowds. Do we know who that is? You know, I can't see anybody. Could I see some faces here?
His Holiness Radhanath Swami Maharaj.
Haribo, correct. Can I see you, Prabhu? Can you put me up?
Yes, Prabhu.
Thank you. Can you put Maharaj up there also? Or either you or him? That's all right. You please stay up. I can get some reaction. It's nice. Although it's very nice to have Maharaj's picture. It's like I'm speaking to him. So anyway, this is a huge, you can see the crowds. 10,000 people at night would come to hear Prabhupada's lecture. And then throughout the day, probably, 100,000 people would visit. So Radhanath Swami was not the only person that was very influenced by this program. There was another Westerner in the crowd, and his name, he later took initiation. He's Dadi Harta Prabhu. And he was in the audience. He couldn't understand Prabhupada's lecture very well, but one thing came through, and that was the idea of surrender. But he wasn't ready to do that. But of course, he had great benefit by seeing Prabhupada, and later became his disciple. A wonderful devotee. This is a program on stage at that pandal, a wedding. And the people were thrilled to have this wedding on stage. 10,000 people as guests. And it was the Vegavan Prabhu from Sweden and his wife from Australia. I forget her name. Prabhupada called this the real United Nations. So this is the priest, Supal Swami. And in the very left part of the picture, you can see one sadhu with long hair. Can you recognize him?
At the back, that is, I think, Radhanath Swami Maharaj.
Yes, it is. Here's proof he was on stage. I don't think there's any other picture, but this was taken from the film. But it is indeed Radhanath Swami. So Jean was back home, my girlfriend, and I invited her to come to India. She didn't know what to expect. I was writing her letters, telling her of my, wonderful time with devotees. And she was thinking, oh, he's going to become a devotee. So she came and met me in Mumbai, and she met Prabhupada during this time of the Pandal program. And when she was here for a few days in Mumbai, we would wander around the city, taking different pictures, kind of, art photography. And nothing to do with anything transcendental, but this was our training. We have a lot of these, but I'll just show you a couple. So her idea to come to India, not only to meet me, but also she wanted to do a photo essay on an Indian village untouched by Western technology, Western civilization. So we didn't know where to go. So we asked Prabhupada where we should go in India to do this project. And Prabhupada gave another startling answer. He said, wherever you go, you will get your camera stolen and they will cheat you. Okay. Then he said, best you go to Vrindavan. So we did that, but first we came to Nepal. Here we are at 10,000 feet in a beautiful valley, no one else around. And we look off into the distance into the, layer after layer of mountains going up and up. And it was a very idyllic scene. We stayed here for 5 days. We bought one book. I had read Bhagavad Gita as it is. It was the old Macmillan edition with a blue cover. And Vishaka started reading that also. So it was the first time she had some inclination that she might be something other than the body, that she might be a soul. And that intrigued her. So that was the beginning of interest. And then we came back down to Vrindavan. One of her favorite places to photograph was in the temples with the widows, chanting Hare Krishna all day. she was very moved to see their devotion and their faith. So anyway, we stayed in Vrindavan a month and then went to Calcutta. I was initiated in Calcutta. And then Prabhupada, when he came to Calcutta, he stayed for some time and then took us all to Vrindavan. And here we were married and Vishaka was initiated in Vrindavan. And then we had another unexpected visitor who came to the wedding, and that was Radhanath Swami. Now this is November 1971. Maharaj met Prabhupada in March. So it's about 7 or 8 months later. Maharaj had gone back to the Himalayas. He came to Bombay to get his visa. He went back to the Himalayas. He came back down to Vrindavan because he heard Prabhupada was here. So unexpectedly, he just walked into our wedding. Maharaj had a habit of doing that, showing up at very important events in our life. So we stayed with Prabhupada after that and taking pictures. Here's Vishaka Devi with her camera. And she was the only woman really allowed to be right in front. Although she's going to give her presentation tomorrow, I believe, right? She's on tomorrow?
Yes, Prabhuji, I will just check. Mataji's presentation is there. I think she is speaking on. Yeah, tomorrow she is speaking tomorrow.
Okay, she's going to tell you a wonderful story about Rath Yatra. Picture she took at Rath Yatra. If she doesn't tell you the story, tell her to tell it. Ask her to tell it. 1974 Rath Yatra in San Francisco. Excuse me. This is in Jaipur. We stayed at the palace of the Queen, Gayatri Devi. And she really liked Prabhupada so much. She would discuss confidential matters in her life with Prabhupada. And every day we'd go to the Radha Govinda temple and take Mahaprasadam. It was really a treat. We'd also go to Bangalarti with, residents running through the streets, so enthusiastic to go to the Mangalarti. So let's just go back to this picture. We served Prabhupada in Juhu. We stayed in India for 2.5 years. And then we got a letter in Juhu asking us to come to America to make the first film on ISKCON. It was called the Hare Krishna People. Karandar Prabhu, the head of the BBT at the time, had the idea and asked Prabhupada, and Prabhupada also liked the idea because there was no films on the movement at the time. So we went back to America and bought equipment and went to different places overseas also, London, Paris, and collected different footage that had been shot from different places around the world, and then edited that film and premiered the film in Prabhupada's room in Mayapur called the Hare Krishna People. So Prabhupada liked the film very much. He said you have used good psychology in making the film. And I never asked Prabhupada what that meant. But I think it meant that we tried as far as possible to present the film so the public would appreciate it. And we try to do that also with our current film. It's very successful. Hare Krishna, the mantra, the movement, and the Swami who started it all. The public appreciation for that film has been huge. And we're very thrilled to have that kind of exposure of Prabhupada. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said that just by seeing a Vaishnava, one's auspicious life has begun. So these viewers of the film around the world, many of them knew absolutely nothing about the movement, about Prabhupada, and they had a 90-minute darshan. Not only just seeing Prabhupada, but hearing him and seeing him walk and talk. And so we feel very blessed to have that service. How is the time, Prabhu? How are we doing?
Yes, Prabhuji, we can go. We can take few questions are also there.
Sure.
So should we take now?
I think so.
Okay.
Actually more. I can talk about the films, but why don't we take a few questions?
Okay, a few questions are there. So one question is by one devotee. He's telling Hare Krishna Prabhuji, have you thought ever to make film on Chaitanya Mahaprabhu or Lord Krishna?
Yes, actually, it's interesting you asked that because we did have an idea. In fact, Bhakti Charu Swami, we worked with him on a film on Lord Chaitanya. We only got to the script. It was never produced. The funding didn't come through. We had one Indian family that we thought was eager to help, but it never happened. We still have that script. I'm sure that something will be produced one day. So I don't feel myself qualified to. It's very difficult production.
One more question is there. He's asking, Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam. Prabhuji, which picture clicked by you was most liked by Srila Prabhupada?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I know which ones I like best. But Prabhupada didn't, he would never, he wasn't in that kind of mood to look at his own pictures. So he never mentioned anything to me. You could ask Vishaka that question also. I remember a beautiful time in Prabhupada's room in Vrindavan. It was 1971. We had just gone to Vrindavan. That same time we had pictures I showed you. And we were in Prabhupada's room, and I asked him to pose next to the picture of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati in his room. And he was just like a little boy. He said, "Should I stand here?" And he looks so innocent and young. And that picture, I think everybody's seen that picture. He has this danda, and the picture of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta is there. And Prabhupada has this really wonderful little smile. I'd like to see all of you. You've been looking at me, so can everyone turn their cameras on?
Krishna, devotees can switch on their camera if they have proper internet connection. One last question is there, Prabhuji.
Yeah.
Should I? Okay.
So I'm trying to. Okay, hold on a second. There we go. So I'm clicking on the full screen, but I don't see it. Hold on. Anyway, I've got some technical problems. I can't see everyone on the screen. Maybe I can, hold on. See, there was another question, sorry.
One more question is there, Prabhuji.
Yes.
So can you please share the pastime when Srila Prabhupada said to you, don't keep your camera down?
Okay. That was in Paris in 1973 during the installation of the deities. And I forget if it was before the installation or after. Prabhupada spent some days in Paris. And there was a big kirtan. I was taking pictures with my still camera. I was taking both movies and still pictures. And Hansa, I believe Hansadita was leading the kirtan. It was fantastic kirtan. So I decided to, after I took some pictures, I decided to put my camera down and join the kirtan. So I was dancing in the kirtan. I look at Prabhupada and he motions me to come like this. And I go close to his head. It was a very loud kirtan. And I couldn't hear what he said, so I put my ear really close to his mouth. He said, never put down your camera. So I immediately grabbed my camera and took more pictures.
Okay, these are the questions, Prabhuji. If you want to share, you can share more about Srila Prabhupada and Guru Maharaj.
Any other questions?
These were all questions from different devotees.
Okay. I'll just share a little bit more about the film, the reception of the film. It was free on YouTube up until a few days ago, and we'd like to get it back on YouTube free. In fact, we'd like to make it free from now on. And the film has been put in 24 languages. Our goal is to put the film in as many languages as Prabhupada's books are translated into, and that's 86. So we need support for that if anybody's inspired. Our latest language was the language of Ethiopia, and 20 million people speak that language. So there's hundreds of languages. In fact, I've heard even a couple of thousand languages in the world. And the Christians really have the Bible in, I don't know, a few thousand languages. So we still have a lot of work to do in terms of getting the world. This is just the beginning of the movement going all over the world. It's really just the beginning. 50 years is not a long time. And actually the historians, the religious historians of religion say that our movement has spread very, very quickly compared to other new religions. Of course, we know the prediction of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that his name will be heard in every town and village. And Prabhupada had, of course, firm faith in that and firm faith in the holy name. And Bhakti Charu Swami also had that faith and was so loyal and dedicated to Prabhupada. So we hope that his followers will also take up that same mood of life's dedication to the mission of Prabhupada. Another time, my favorite time with Prabhupada was when I was during traveling for those 2 months. I was in Allahabad at the Kumbh Mela, and then it was so cold. It was so austere that I left and went alone. I left the party and went to Benares because I knew the devotees were coming there. I also had a friend in Benares, so I stayed with him. And then when the devotees came, I went to their house. It's really strange because the host of that particular house was a very big house. Invited the Prabhupada to come, and when Prabhupada came, he just left. And there was Prabhupada and the devotees had the whole house. When I arrived, Prabhupada was just finishing up a massage in the yard in the sun. So I went to the backyard and walked into this beautiful scene. Prabhupada had taken a pot of gur and broken it and handing out pieces of the pot to each devotee, and everyone was licking the pieces of pot with a gore on it, including Prabhupada. And it was a beautiful scene. So I walk into this beautiful scene, and Prabhupada looks at me and he said, "Oh, you've been captured by Krishna." So that was my favorite story. You confirming what I knew to be in my heart. It was just confirmed by Prabhupada. Was a wonderful experience.
There are a few more questions, Prabhuji.
Yes.
One devotee is asking, Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam, can you please share Guru Maharaj views on movies and media?
Well, Maharaj was very keen on movies and media, of course. He took up that huge project of Bhakti Charu. And his father was a film director. Did you know that?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Yeah, you probably know more than I do. But, very important, you know, and Prabhupada, we know that Prabhupada wanted media because he financed our first film. He spent $16,000 of his book fund money to make a movie. So that we know that Prabhupada saw the importance of media very early. This is 1973. And Maharaj follows in his footsteps. Very, very important. I mean, media is becoming more and more important. You know, people are losing interest in reading because there's so much, you know, visual stimulation by a movie. It captures more of the senses. But unfortunately, something is lost in that medium, and that is the imagination. By reading, our imagination is very much stimulated. Reading is still very important, and will be, always will be.
One question is, can you please share with us your experience of filming Srila Prabhupada's departure?
Well, that was a very difficult time. I felt like a machine with not many emotions, because I was, you know, concentrating on where I was, the angle and the scene and the lighting and the sound. My wife was doing the sound work. At that time, there was separation between the camera and the sound recorder. There were two machines, separate machines. Well, you know, as a filmmaker, automatically I felt it was important to film Prabhupada during those times. I remember Tamal Krishna Goswami initially wouldn't let me film. He was very much against it. And I was kind of a pest to him, pestering him. Let me come in to film. And finally, he brought us in, Vishaka and myself. And he started, he was glorifying our service to Prabhupada. And then he said, they would like to film you. And Prabhupada said, let him do what he wants. So we got permission, and then we just filmed everything. For some years, we never released that film. We showed it to the GBC, and they were strongly felt we shouldn't release it. And it wasn't released for 15 years. But over that period of time, I got many, many requests to see the film. And I showed the film to a few devotees, maybe 5 or 6 during that time. And invariably, they were more enthusiastic after seeing that film. They were very moved to see Prabhupada up until the very end preaching. So it seemed to help them, and finally we did release it. And I just heard recently from Charu Swami that he watches that film once a year on Prabhupada's disappearance. For a long time, he couldn't see it himself. But once a year, he does see it, and it's inspiring to him.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. These were few questions by devotees. So we are very thankful for your wonderful association, and especially we are very thankful for sharing your your memories with all of us, and especially the past time you shared about Guru Maharaj, that watch, you offer your watch to him, and you shared the memories of 1970s, and you took us back to that years and traveling with Srila Prabhupada, meeting with different devotees, and how the time, the situation would be, or it would be so nice to be with Srila Prabhupada, and he was being attended by the local people. So you took us back to that years and make us to meet so many devotees of that time, those who were leading the movement. And thank you very much, Prabhuji, for giving your valuable association to all of us. We look forward from you more Krishna conscious movies ahead, just like recent Hare Krishna movie. And we also will be very fortunate tomorrow to have association of his good wife, Her Grace Vishakha Mataji. And so we beg both of you to empower us so that we can follow on the principles, on the teachings that Srila Prabhupada and Guru Maharaj taught us, and continue our services in ISKCON. And we request you to kindly visit ISKCON Ujjain whenever you are coming India after this corona situation.
I have never been. I've always wanted to go.
Yes, Prabhuji, you are most welcome. You should come. It is one of the important project that Guru Maharaj started, and
Yes.
you will be very happy to be at Ujjain.
Thank you so much. Hare Krishna, all of you. Thank you so much for your kind attention.
Hare Krishna, thank you. So we offer our gratitude to Prabhuji by loudly chanting one time Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. His Grace Yadubara Prabhu ki Jai. His Divine Krishna Prabhupada ki Jai. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.